It can't rain all the time. I'm John Renton with the retro review of The Crow from 1994, directed by Alex Proyas, who would go on to do projects like Dark City, Mr. Murdoch, yes? Sleep now. Who remembers Dark City? More importantly, who remembers Dark City's plot? Because I don't remember it having much of a plot, at least a plot that made a whole lot of sense, but it was definitely the definition of style over substance. Prime example of style over substance, if nothing else. Visually arresting and absolutely goddamn hollow. Speaking of visually arresting and absolutely fucking hollow, iRobot, that had the gorgeous Bridget Moynihan in it. She still looks absolutely goddamn amazing. Great genetics there. Also, take a look at the robot design there, and then take a look at I Am Legend. They're one and the same. You're welcome. You'll never be able to unsee it. I don't know how anybody could take I Am Legend seriously, knowing that they're just reskinned robots from iRobot. In a movie called iRobot, surely you jest. I may retro review iRobot at some point, but also he did Gods of Egypt. One of these things is not like the other, and one of these things is Gods of fucking Egypt. Good grief. Good fucking grief. I may rewatch that at some point, even though I remember hating it. So, this was written by two people, David J. Chow, who would... Look at his IMDb page. He did Critters 3, Critters 4. Critters 4 that looked like the oldest of the fucking Critters movies. That's not his fault, but still. He did, I believe, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, and he did Texas Chainsaw Massacre The Beginning. So yeah, I don't think that guy really understands how to write shit. That being said, let's go to the other. John, Don't Call Me Shirley, who did The Specialist. I think that was one with Stallone and Sharon Stone. Sharon Stone. Who wouldn't? And also some television. So it's based on the comic book by James O'Barr. Sorry. I don't know why the hell I said it like that. Thankfully not Art Barr. Fucking piece of shit there. If you're not a wrestling fan, you have no idea who Art Barr is. So yes, with the new one coming up in just a little bit, I decided to rewatch this film that would lead to subsequent sequels that were not very good. The 1996 or 97, I forget what year, City of Angels was all right, but I remember the main actor having to really overcome his, European accent. I can't remember if it was Spanish or French. And you had the third one. I think Edward Furlong was in that, and then David Boreanaz was in one of them, and Kirsten Dunst was in one of them. They did 4 fucking Crow movies, and the first one was the best. So anyway, you have Eric Draven, played by the late Brandon Lee, who unfortunately did die during production. You had Michael Massey, who played the character of Funboy, who ended up firing the gun that actually did lead to the death of Brandon Lee. And obviously it was not his fault. This was a miscue. There are, of course, conspiracy theories that say somebody had out for Brandon Lee, because his dad, Bruce Lee, died young. Brandon Lee died so goddamn young. And Michael apparently was riddled with guilt, even though it wasn't his fault. He took a break from acting. He was in 7. I think he passed away a number of years ago. But he would, according to IMDb, he would actually take residuals and donate them, to good causes. He didn't want to keep them because he felt they were blood money, but obviously that was not his fault. It was clearly a preventable act. It was a miscue, but it was not his fault. But I can see why that would wear on him. So yes, Brandon Lee played Eric Draven, the Crow, that would go on to inspire Sting to be the Crow. Well, Scott Hall to tell Sting to be the Crow. If you are not a wrestling fan, you are so confused as to why I'm doing that. So, he along with his girl Shelly, fiance, they are killed on October 30th, Devil's Night, by a violent gang, and sometime later he is resurrected to seek vengeance. The leader of this particular gang is Top Dollar. Not Top Dollar, not the flop dollar that is in wrestling, despite having no discernible talent to do any of it. Played by Michael Wincott. You want to talk about people with recognizable voices. Yes, you have your Sean Connerys, you have your Gregory Pecks, you have your Vincent Prices. Michael Wincott, who was a cameraman operator in Nope, and was also in Alien Resurrection. If you know, if you're familiar with at least a few of his films, he has an instantly recognizable voice. You could not be looking and realize, oh shit, that's him. And he has weird Highlander-like hair. It's almost like Lord Raiden, Christopher Lambert's Lord Raiden hair. I'm just going to talk about some of the stuff that I remember from this movie because I just rewatched it, and also it's not going to take long to really recount the entire flick because it's just a revenge flick. You do have Tony Todd in a supporting role. Because it's the 90s, it's a dark movie with some horror elements, so of course Tony fucking Todd's in it. And I love Tony Todd, don't get me wrong. But you have Ba Ling who's in this. Who, my God. Look at her here. Look at her recent photo shoot. 30 years have passed and she looks the fucking same. Ernie Hudson is also in this. Speaking of people that look exactly the same. That motherfucker is nearly 80 years old. Incredible genetics all around. Genetics didn't say Brandon Lee here. So sorry. Terrible act. But yeah, him and his fiancée are killed, and a crow resurrects Eric so he can seek vengeance. And yeah, some scenes were digitally worked around, altered because they hadn't finished filming yet. And this is so fucking 90s that you could practically hear Nirvana and like Butthole Surfers and like Hole I think was late 90s. You could hear Garbage start to play, the band, by the way. Shirley Manson, who wouldn't. And you could hear a whole bunch of just grungy revenge flick is basically what it is. It had a $23 million budget, which would be just twice that today, $48.8 million. The opening was $11.7 million, $24.8 million in today's money. And gross, basically, the worldwide gross is like 200 grand more than this. $50.6 million, $107.3 million in today's money. I remember seeing a lot of advertisements for it. I did end up renting it because it was rated R, and in 1994, I was 13. I was allowed to rent it, and we were able to watch it. That's back when we had to go to video stores, kids, and rent VHSs or DVDs. And at this point, it was VHS. We had to rent tapes and actually rewind and fast forward, like on a remote or on the VCR. We couldn't just click a button, like, like on the Roku here. We couldn't go to a streaming app. We had to actually, work for our goddamn movies. Anyway, some of the sets were cool, and some of that CGI was just not great. I mean, it wasn't even great back then, but to think just like, we thought that looked good back then. I mean, if a couple doesn't die together, are they really a happy couple? We get the biggest issue I have with this fucking movie. And, okay, a couple issues before I really go into this stuff, because I want to say it here before I forget. Some of the editing is really not great, and the use of slow-mo, and there were some moments that were really choppy where I was like, okay, they're trying to make it like the comic book, and they're trying to honor the comic book, and maybe the studio wanted that, but it took me out of it. And also, I pose this question. If Brandon Lee had lived, would this movie be remembered as fondly? Genuine question. I say no. And Brandon Lee was a good actor. If he had lived on, who knows? He could have been in a lot more films. He could have done a few more and dipped right the fuck out and done something else. I don't know. It's remembered very fondly because Brandon Lee did create a fairly memorable role. I don't know if I'd say iconic, even though it did lead to Sting being the Crow and various others dressing up like him, and would set the tone. You could argue The Matrix was influenced a little bit by this, as far as the trench coat look and stuff like that. There is a young girl named Sarah who's very distraught. Shelley and Eric took care of her. And a crow shows up and resurrects him. He's confused, obviously. He does eventually realize that he has powers, but also he realizes that if he touches certain people that were involved in this, he can take on their memories, take on their heartache. And he does that with Ernie Hudson's cop, who actually stayed there with Shelley while she was in the hospital, which was actually a pretty nice scene. Every criminal suddenly starts yelling, "Fire it up, fire it up, fire it up." I really didn't like I did not like the editing. I just didn't. I thought that the editing was kind of shit. So, I just kept calling him Draven the Hunter, because why the hell not? Craven the Hunter is coming out close to Christmas. Good fucking luck. So, that being said, he kills the one guy with dreads that I thought kind of looked like Velveteen Dream, just without hitting on the young kids, allegedly. Victims, aren't we all? And there were moments that were cool. It was kind of cool. He, stabbed the guy with his knives. He burned down the pawn shop. Did you hear me rapping at your door? Tell them that Eric Draven, Eric Draven did this, and death is coming for them tonight. And then he blew up the pawn shop, which was kind of funny. And then Ernie Hudson confronts him and says, "Don't move. If you move, Snow White, you're dead." Well, I say I'm dead, and I move. There were some nice lines in this, but he does eventually end up saying to Sarah, because he saved Sarah from getting hit by a cab, and says, it can't rain all the time. That was a song that he did. Apparently, he was in a band. Top Dollar and Micah, a.k.a. Bylink, they smoked an eye in a dish. Bylink was obsessed with eyes, and that would come back to haunt her. Yeah, I gotta be honest, like, some of this was just kind of a mess. I mean, Ernie Hudson says at one point when he confronts him in his apartment, "Are you sure you're not some kind," or it's like, "Are you some kind of ghost?" I get it. He's Winston. See, that's creative writing. I refuse to believe the guy that wrote Critters 3 and 4 actually did that, but nevertheless, maybe Ernie Hudson improvised it. That's what I'll choose to believe, because the writers haven't done anything good. That being said, I saw her through your eyes. I saw her pain through your eyes. Okay, I'm sorry. I think it's Peter Gabriel. Peter Gabriel's estate's going to sue me for that. So, that Top Dollar guy, Michael Wincott, just stabs the owner of the pawn shop because everything. He's trying to get all these answers. All these are getting killed. He does do this one nice thing a little bit earlier where there's Darla, the mother of Shelley, and she says, she's not very good to her daughter because she's on drugs. He gets morphine out of her, like squeezes her arm, and like it pops out of her veins, which is kind of gross, but a good visual for like don't do drugs. And then we just get to a couple other nice scenes. There's a part where he gets this guy T-Bird in a car, not a T-Bird, more in the pity, and fries him to his car. That was kind of cool. There were, more of the villains are gathering. There's this one guy, Skank. That's his actual name, by the way. There was a white cat that was in the apartment. I'm glad that the white cat had a good life. I hope so. And he's talking to Sarah. Everything's going good. Ernie Hudson and the character of Sarah actually have a, good cop white girl relationship. I'm sorry to say it like that, but see, it's Detroit, so it's like, okay, she's one of the good ones. So, the idea is, Bylink realizes, hey, if we kill the crow, then we damage him. So there you go. There's a big old shootout, where everybody shoots at Brandon Lee, and then he attacks everybody, because he can't die. The character. Sorry, again. And then the police end up chasing after him, and then the remaining villains come up with the cockeyed idea of destroying the crow. So they lead him into a church. Ernie Hudson shows up. They manage to shoot the crow, but not kill it. Ernie Hudson to the rescue briefly. He's like, "So stay in front of me. I thought you were invincible." It's like, I was. I'm not anymore. Well, shit. But then Ernie Hudson gets shot up the dark tower. And then it looks like Byling's about to kill the crow, and then the crow pecks out her eyes because she kept going for her eyes, and she got killed, and ha-ha! And she wasn't able to lend her credence to this. I'm so sorry. And then we get Michael Wincott doing, you could literally shave at the motherfucker's voice. It's astonishing. He does this whole thing where, I admire your perseverant, or, your ability to, just persevere and do all this. And I wanted to clear out that building, do this, but it's nothing personal. I'm going to miss you. But, because he had stabbed Draven at one point. Draven can die, but he's still bound and determined. So then he suddenly has all the pain from, when Ernie Hudson was there with Shelley. He gives it all to the villain. And then Top Dollar goes onto this, spiked part of this church. The top of the steeple. And there we go. Now Draven can rest and everything's fine. No crime in Detroit will ever take place again. Okay, it's not a great movie. There are issues, the aforementioned editing, and the fact that a lot of the plot is typical. But it does have style, it does have substance. And again, it achieved more of a mythos because of Brandon Lee passing away. I will die on that hill. Never mind. Let's just move on. I'll just let that marinate there. But, yeah, it was pretty good overall. Now let's see how the new one is. I don't think it's going to be very good. No, I'm not going to retro-review the other Crow movies because this one at times was a little bit difficult to sit through. And this was the good one. So anyway, let me know. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritland. I'll see you soon.